That's what she said. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in here. You haven't signed it. I think you signed it. Dan has.
But that's signed.
Okay.
I'm concerned that that's out. That number's out there.
Dan, we need to have you sign the paper before you leave.
Are they in here?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was the one you were there, we just couldn't hear you.
Yes, yeah. I don't know what's going on. Sometimes it's like I had another meeting and all of a sudden it's like something's wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's my computer or what.
Basically said,
Okay, this is signed copy. Do you want to
Right.
Yeah, we just stick it in there and done like that.
And I'll take this down, have to sign it.
Then we'll get started.
Shotgun doesn't work.
That's like, what the pitch could be.
Like 30
And call this meeting of the Culver Board of Zoning Appeals to order. Ask everybody to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to take my mask off as we meet here, so just so you can hear me. Start by having a roll call. Our secretary this evening for Lee, DJ Hubler, is doing it from home. So if you'll have a roll call for me, please, JD, I'd appreciate it.
Sorry about that, I was muted. Mr. Adams.
Here.
Mr. McManaway.
Present.
Mr. Osborne.
Present.
Ms. Marshall. Mr. DeWitt.
Present.
And I'm JD Hubler, present.
And Ms. Marshall is on vacation, and she is our usual secretary, and JD is taking over this evening, and we do appreciate it. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the June 18th minutes. Everybody have a chance to read those? And if so, I would entertain a motion that we approve them.
I'll second.
Okay, it's moved by Mr. McManaway and seconded by Mr. Osborne to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 It passed unanimously. We just have two petitions on the agenda for this evening. The first one is 2020-007B, and this is a petition filed by Mr. Kevin Berger. So Kevin, I guess it's your job to present to us here.
And I'm not, well, this is new territory.
Okay.
So if you want me to wear a mask representing you, I will.
If you stay your distance, that's
Otherwise,
fine.
I'll stay the distance.
Sure.
How many of you have been to the site?
I was there yesterday.
You've gone, okay, so everybody's been to the site. I do have some additional pictures if you would like to see them, but the same thing. I don't want to pass out anything if it's an issue, but if something comes up, I do have several different views of things that we can share. I can walk by and pull it for you, but whatever works best for everyone.
JD, did you make it to the site?
Yes.
Okay.
And I tried to include quite a bit with the original package, knowing what we were doing with this and whether you would be able to get out there. So I assume you saw those things. We are looking at a variance for this property because of the tightness of where it's at. This is one of the lots on the west shore that is extremely small. It would be virtually unbuildable in normal circumstances. It does not meet the setbacks basically in any direction at this point, except towards the street where it's, just super long. The house has a walkout basement. What we're looking for is a deck extension on the front to give an upper deck area. The houses on either side have that. We are going over the line for the site distance, but not very much, only a foot or two over the line in that direction because we're trying to hold it back. We've cut the deck at an angle, so at the side, it's only wide enough that you can get up on it. This is not going to be in any form a party deck or anything that you can do those things with. It's just not that size. We are on the north side. If you sight along the line of that deck posts on the front, we are actually behind that. We have not gone out as far as those posts on that side. There is a lower window on the house to the north that will be somewhat affected looking down across the patio. It's already somewhat affected by the neighbors and what's going on there, but we're going to have that issue too. The deck, because of the proximity to the north property line, we have pulled it back. It is not going to be out as far as the house. It's pulled back about 10 inches from that direction. So we're not clear out, so continuing the plane on the north side of the house. But we are out in front on the site distance. Because we are so close along there, we are also asking to be able to screen that. We're showing a slatted screen that goes up that side. This home, if you were there, you see the comparison between the homes. There's just not that much space. They don't have any place for out storage outside on that side, so all your lake stuff has no place to go. It will end up in that lower area outside of walkout basement. Kayaks, tubes, all the little things that you normally associate with the lake, that's the only place they have for it. So we're kind of looking at it as a positive that we're screening that stuff out. But that's one of the issues, that we are creating a screen along that side. The screen right now comes up on the side and turns a little bit across the front, gives some wind protection for them, and then it is on the railing height on the upper deck, so it does the same thing on those sides. We don't think it's that intrusive, but it is a variance and it is a site distance thing. So, questions?
I got one, you want to get 27 feet from the lake, now, right? And where the house is right now, how far is that from the lake now?
The deck comes out approximately 13 feet, so the house would be 40 feet.
34 feet now.
Yeah.
I didn't measure it
Yeah.
on the tape, I knew it was.
On the plans, the deck is 13 feet out, and we're approximating that it's about 27 feet to the lake.
So it's just about where the sidewalk comes off the little deck. Or the patio right there.
Yes, we're not adding any impervious area with any of this, we're within that, and where that little brick wall comes out, we're not coming out toward the end of that brick wall, and we're going to be inside that brick wall.
You're pretty close to where I'm at.
Well, if you notice, Roger Theus is a contractor on this, so it's nice we have a local contractor working on it. He put holes up at the outside corners, and there is a piece of tape that ran across there, so you can kind of see that. And in a couple of the pictures I took, again, if you want to see them, I took pictures along that sight line so you can see what that line is. But I'm assuming since you were on the property, you kind of looked at that, but I do have pictures if you want.
And then, question on the, south side, coming down the side right there, I mean, I couldn't tell where the property line was, so anyway, I know you got 3 feet.
It's not been surveyed, with all of the stuff. So there's a house survey, but there's not one that shows exactly where that line is in relation to that, patio and that railing, but we're pretty sure that railing along there is the property line.
Okay, so it comes all the way back up where the.
Yeah, I don't know if you're the GIS, but that isn't even, those lots.
Between that and trees, I didn't know which trees are on the right side, and, yeah.
Some of that stuff is on the line.
I mean, how of it as far as, I mean, you couldn't get, probably.
And that's the other thing, we're coming a little bit farther forward with these steps to wrap the steps around the deck, but those would be low to the ground, so, again, we're covering existing impervious areas, so we're not increasing the impervious area when we do that.
There wasn't a survey done when the property was bought to know exactly where these lines are?
There's a location survey that shows the house, but they don't, unless you specifically ask for it, you don't get real accurate on site plan stuff, so it's not exact on that. And there was a survey in your packet that showed what the house was. Fix up that wall, that brick wall. I'm just not comfortable telling you that it's exactly there. As close as I can tell, that railing is the property line from the survey, but they didn't actually locate that rail on the survey.
Now the cover, whatever you want to call it, is that wood slats? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And how much gap between?
We were talking about before we came in, it's looking at about a ½ inch gap between the slats, and we're talking about probably a 1x2 on the slats. So maybe it's 10% open at this point. It's mostly closed at this point. It will let the wind through. Yeah, basically that's just functional, so that it doesn't, we didn't want hard surfaces going to try and be impact resistant, so.
Questions? Mr. Bueller, do you have any questions?
Not right now, thanks.
Mr. Husband?
I know what Kevin was talking about the house survey. I just can't believe that we wouldn't have a lot surveyed and exactly where that is and where it is positioned to the neighbor.
We do on that house, and I'm sorry, I didn't measure also to see if that rating's exactly on the line, but that's what's being treated as the line.
So how far is that from the actual line, the house?
On the south side,
Yes, on the south side.
It varies because the house does not sit
sounds
perfectly parallel. So at the front, it's probably 9.5 to 10.5 feet. But as you go further back, there are offsets in the house and it gets closer. But then again, it's not sitting parallel. So at the back corner, it might only be 8.5 feet.
and full disclosure, that's to the foundation. And there is about a 16-inch overhang on top of that, so.
I have a survey. I mean, I had it straight down before I don't know if I can forward this to you, but
But it doesn't show the railing, but she's asking about where that property line is exactly. Right, the survey didn't show the rail on the side.
It does show the dimensions from the house to the side.
Right. Right.
It shows the house's position, it does not give the actual dimension.
Because of it not being square, I think they gave us a dimension as a worst case scenario, but they didn't give us dimensions all the way along.
I measured on west end, I guess that's towards the back side of the house, where it goes over on the side. And I measured over 64 inches, whatever, 18-inch overhang, put your 3'6", whatever. And you could ride it out of the edge of the sidewalk, right next to where it was. I went down toward the lake and I went back as far as the park of the trees, so it went pretty much in line. So I know you can't get much more than that.
And the retaining wall is on the line. I don't know exactly where it is with the line, but the retaining wall is on the line.
If the line is any different than what the 3'6" setback would be, we're not talking inches difference in what you get. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, probably clear when I had that.
And it's one of those situations where that encroachment's already started there
It's already done.
with the steps and stuff. We're bringing it a little bit farther forward, but it's still below the retaining wall grade as we turn around there, so it's not really affecting the view on anything with that.
The southwest corner of the house, there's a little, are you putting that same wood back
Yes.
there? Is that what it looked like? Okay.
Yes.
And that's just, what kind of, that's just a storage area? Is that what that's going to be?
No, on the southwest corner, again, it's just to provide a little bit of wind screen around that door as you're
Oh,
coming in there.
there's a door there?
Yeah, there's a door going in there, and that's also just architecturally kind of tying things together. So we're using the same material there, so we're using it at the front just to have that same effect.
Okay.
And so I think the idea was is that you have a trash can there, and it would be enclosed.
Okay.
Where,
Because I was looking on the one picture and it looked like, I thought Shirley and I put in the washer and dryer. I think it's a little square. I thought, we're not Florida.
So when the deck in front, that's like a clear plexiglass? Or how's it, it looks like in the picture that it's, how's that railing? In the front, the front of the
The
deck?
railing is shown on there is shown in a glass panel.
Right, yes, that's what.
We're considering that, or we're considering going to the thin wire.
Wire,
But
okay.
we're basically looking to do a railing that is fairly visible. You know, there's always a possibility that we go back to spindles, but probably not.
Mr. DeWitt, do you have any comments?
Well, I think we're looking at a couple situations here. As far as where the front deck goes and the setback from the line of sight, if the Summers had built their house 25 feet off of the lake, which they could have, then we wouldn't even be talking about what they want to do with their deck. It would just be a no-brainer because they're going to be well within the 25 feet on the Ryans. So that line of sight, because the Summers house is there, puts the crimp on them. They're going to be, right now the Summers are probably about 42 feet or so off of.
That's the south.
To the south. Yeah, to the south. So they're 40 some feet, 42 thereabouts back. If they would have been at 25 and then you draw your line across there, it's a no-brainer. It's just a given. And I think what they're doing with the angles and everything else on the deck, I think that's appropriate and the best use and the best that they can come up with. You know, as far as the side yard setback, that is a very, very tight property. And without doing what they want to do, there's just about nothing they can do with it. So that would be what I would look at there. I would say yes on the front deck, and I would be inclined to say yes on the side yard setback.
Any other questions from the board? Questions or comments from the audience? Anybody here?
I'm John Christ.
John Christ?
Christ, C-R-I-S-T.
Okay.
I'm owner of 918 West Shore Drive. I am owner of the property on the north.
Correct.
I don't have any problem with the deck being built.
the concern that we have is you're essentially talking about putting a solid screen. I understand we're talking, maybe an inch gap between, but for all practical purposes, it's going to completely occlude line of sight. So we're looking at approximately a 13-foot extension of what is code for the top of the railing? 3.5 foot?
38 inches, 38
Yeah,
inches.
we're looking at a 38-inch rail.
So we're looking at approximately a 14-foot high wall, 13-foot wide, that is completely closed off to view. And that, I know that there are new rules about fencing. Now, I don't know that this is a fence, but they're talking about it as a screen. So we object to the fact that you're talking about covering the entire north side with this, as well as part of the eastern side, the lake side, with this. We have an open deck. The front of our house is, I believe, 1 foot west of the front of Ryan's house. It's about a foot back in terms of, when we built in 2010, and by the way, that 910 property was owned by my wife's family many years ago and was sold to Mr. Wagner. We do have a survey, and that survey shows that part of the sidewalk between our two properties, which when Mr. Wagner bought the house, he and my wife's grandmother agreed to split the cost of the sidewalk because they thought that the property line was right in the middle. Hence, when we tore down our houses and built in 2010, was when we found out that there was a little bit of dispute, or not dispute, inaccuracies, and that the property line was not in the middle of the sidewalk as we thought, but rather about 2.5 inches. Anyhow, there's already a brick retaining wall there, we call it a knee wall. It appears from the plans that the knee wall is also going to be built up in front of the deck. I don't know if that's changed or not. But the issue still remains, if you're going to enclose the lower part of the deck, and then as you're railing for the upper part of the deck, it's going to be enclosed with the same material. You're completely removing sight, and it would be looking like at the side of the house.
And can I just ask, are you talking about from the window on the south side there, or are you talking about from the bottom deck?
From both the window and underneath the deck.
Okay.
As well as from the upper deck too, is what we're seeing. Now, that becomes less of an issue because I believe our deck is slightly higher than theirs would be. But still, it's, for all practical purposes, it's going to be a solid enclosure.
I've got a question. Do you say that on the deck, the railing is going to be either clear plexiglass or it's going to be
Right now we're showing the screening going up on the north side.
Okay.
So the screening does go up,
Okay.
as he's said there.
All right.
When I stood out there and you could see in the picture sightline, the lower window in his house is about 8 inches. The east side of the lower window is 8 inches in front of the plane of the house. So their house sits a little bit in front of this house. It definitely, looking through that window, if you were to look at that sight line, you would have a problem. You'd have to be almost looking directly south to have a problem from the front of their house. I understand that that's still a sight line issue. The return across the east side that we're talking about is moot if you are willing to let us do the side, because it's coming back at an angle, and for as far as their view is, they'll never even see that front face because of the screening here. So that's the screening issue that's the problem, not going across the front. I understand their position on that. We are not changing the brick knee wall, so we are not raising it up at all. It is already up over 30 inches back there at the back. So we are recessed. If you look at it from standing out on the Ryan's Pier, this house is down below, the house is on both sides. It just comes down. So we're a little bit lower in every case across that.
And Kevin, sorry to interrupt, but the architect did show that the knee wall currently kind of drops down, maybe about a foot, and he was proposing that come off straight.
Jen, I'm sorry, I was not.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on it. So he was proposing that, but and the elevation from the, I'm trying to pull the drawing here to make sure it's getting, the elevation from the very bottom part to where the deck will start at 7'2", and then the railing is another 3'6". So the total elevation from the very lowest point is 10 foot, 10'8".
I realize anytime a house is built, and I'm sure in 2010 when you built your house, some views out of maybe this house, the north side windows changed when you built that house in.
Actually, the existing houses that were on the property, there were two. It was 918 and 922. Okay? 922 was a pure cottage. 918 was a winterized house. The south end of 918 was approximately 18 inches north of the north edge of the sidewalk. It is now, the house is now 10 foot, 4 inches from the property line. The house that is to be built was moved back approximately 8 to 10 feet from the old location. So in terms of what we built, we built knowing within the parameters that we did not have to request a variance. And so the view for both sides, from my side, Wagner's at the time, and Fleming's, was drastically improved. By removal of what was there.
Of course, what we're dealing with a lot is the view of the lake from the houses, not necessarily the view of the houses themselves. And of course, we deal with that all around the lake.
Oh, I understand.
And anytime a house is put in, it's probably going to take a view out of some window in the house next door. I don't know that a new house can be put in, it's not going to change it. And that's why we have to go with the line of view.
I guess my concern is, I know that you made some changes about fencing that required no more than 50% occlusion in the fence. I know this is not a fence, this is a deck, okay? And if the deck were open underneath, if the deck were railing, were clear as they have proposed on the east side, or if it were spindles or wires, I would have absolutely no objection to it. My only objection is the fact that it's being screened in. And if you were building a structure, a livable structure, and it were closed in, I don't think we would allow that.
So if we were to adjust the screen to get more view through it, that would be acceptable?
depends on what you mean by more, but I don't think it would be acceptable.
So even if we went to the 50% that you're talking about, like on the fence, you don't think that that wouldn't be an acceptable? Like if we took out every other slat, basically created a 50% screening.
It wouldn't be acceptable, but that's up for you to all decide. I mean,
Well, everybody likes to, likes harmony between the neighbors. You know, and we don't want to say, well, yeah, you got to do, but we do try to like to meet some common ground if we can. And that's, you know, and I mean, we understand what you're saying. Don't get me wrong.
I don't know how it would pose a hardship, the building of this deck for its intended use, by not allowing those slats to be put in. You know, and if they're not needed for code, as is for the bringing up on the deck, which is, you know, a completely different thing. But, I don't know how it would prove to be a hardship that would keep this from being built by that screen not being.
And what we're trying to do is just provide some storage protection and not have it look like a yard sale all the time. You know, you're going to have stuff there, and as you see on Town Granite Lake every week after a storm, there's stuff blowing all over the place, and this gives them a place on the lakeside that they can hide things without actually doing anything. So it's just, that's what our goal is, to provide a little privacy and protection for our things.
So how about if it didn't go all the way up to if the deck part wasn't the solid stuff, would that?
So
And
taking
then
it to the bottom
what
of
if
the
the,
deck and
yeah,
not up on the railing.
Yeah, like a 6 foot.
Well, you already, if you're talking about protection, the brick knee wall inside their property is already providing them some protection. On the north side of the wall, the height of it, because it's somewhat stepped, is anywhere from 3 or 4 inches to maybe 15 inches, and then it steps down again to the very eastern edge, it's maybe 18 inches high.
It serves as a retaining wall.
It serves as a retaining wall. And I mean, that's it. That was when Mr. Wagner built it. That's how he built it. But you're essentially talking about closing that area off from there up to the bottom of the deck and then up to the top, where the railing would be. So, I mean, in terms of protection, there's already some there.
other comments, questions? Any questions from the board? Mr. Euclid, could you hear all that for notes wise?
Yeah, I think so. I just want to confirm that I have Mr. Christ from 918 West Shore. It was the speaker from the public input.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Christ is spelled Christ.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So Kevin, do you think there's some way that, you know, you can satisfy his concerns to make this work? Because I know, you know, this is a really small, tight area, and I want to see these people to kind of be able to do what they want to do, but we have this concern to the neighbor.
And I'm not sure because of the comments that anything is not acceptable. So we're willing to make it more of a screen rather than a solid wall. If it were the area above the deck, we could probably work with taking that out.
Right.
But we really like to do that bottom area for that protection down the way.
When I looked at the property, because I looked at it from the lake, I did not look at it from Mr. Chris view, so I'm not exactly sure what that vantage point is that he's talking about. This.
And I did not go on his property. I stood where I thought would be the lines of sights, and what he is losing is a view of the piers and boats going down to the south. If you look at the lot line there and the way the lake lies, you know, the reason we're angling the deck, and that's the way the lake angles along there. It is not a square front on this lot. So yes, you're getting down that way, but by the time, but only 13 feet out, we're not blocking much open water.
Right. Okay.
Well, it depends on where you're sitting on our lower deck.
Well, that's what I know.
You know,
That's what I
if
see.
you're sitting in the middle.
I can't visit it.
It really, it affects it minimum. If you're sitting at the southern edge of our lower deck, where we have a lounge chair, yeah, there's quite a bit of view that's been removed, that will be removed by this.
So Kevin, am I understanding that we'll go ahead and take the railing around the top deck and make that either plexiglass, clear plexiglass and or wire? So that's off of the north side. So that we agree that's going to happen. So the upper deck will either have plexiglass across there or the wire railing going across it.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, I guess one thing I just wanted to make sure, we were trying to put something together here that would be pleasing to the eye aesthetically for everyone. And we can take the whole thing and not do it around the deck. We could, and all our stuff is gonna be laid out everywhere. If I was the neighbor, I'd be like, that looks like a mess, right? We're trying to make it nice and cleaned up architecturally, whether you're on the lake or you're the neighbor. I think I respectfully disagree with John that if there's any sort of view that's blocked. If you stand in the corner of his patio, completely up against his house, and try to lean back and look, there could be a very small area that you can see. And I can't imagine anyone who's ever going to be doing that unless they're tied up to the corner of his house. So it seems a little bit kind of ridiculous to me. But we want to work together. I met with John and I was trying to get his thoughts on it and understand what he was concerned about. And we want to work together. I don't want him to be upset, or I don't want his view to be blocked, or I don't want the value of his home to be any less than what it is. I don't want that. I don't want to be a neighbor. So we're open to any suggestions and stuff. And I think what's strong today is, like, in my opinion, it's kind of hard to back off with, because I think aesthetically it's the best thing for not only us, but for our neighbors and for anyone around us.
And it's just that it's not overreaching. I mean, we didn't try and take a big jump or big step forward. We're trying to stay back within reason.
We always refer to the line of sight. I know when we adapted the line of sight as far as on the lake, it tends to be in somebody's favor as far as how much line of sight they want. And I'm not saying this disrespectfully to anybody, but I know as far as the line of sight goes, it's pretty well what the line is set up for is just about how close the house on one side is as far as how close the house is on the other side. And it's the closest part of it. And a lot of times we have lots that come in an angle like this right here, so you do have to look at what the closest part of either house, north or south. And what we've got here is really, if you wanted to talk about the line of sight, the one on the south side, it's probably a little bit more sight as far as line of sight and down on the north. And the only other thing, I guess I know you designed it as far as the deck being lined with the legs, but I didn't know if it any kind of compromise whatsoever, and I don't even like the word compromise. You got 13.5 on the one side, and then you got about 5 foot 11 basically on the other side, you know.
Yeah, we're all,
So you're in
because of
line.
that angle, you know,
You could build at an angle, but I didn't know if you know, anyway, I know 13.5 as far as the use of your, deck, you know, when you start cutting back, even 12 feet on the other side, you get a limit, whatever you do on the deck. And I know there would be no way that you'd have to take a compromise as far as pulling it back, as far as increasing on the side and the north side, but other than that, as far as you, Dan suggested, you know, if you only went up so high, you would actually open up, but I don't think you'd be opening up as far as what the line of sight term means to start with. I think we're trying to find too much in line of sight.
the drawing I showed you, the reason I passed that out was it shows the lot, it shows the house next door, so you can see the relationship with the way it's set. So to Jerry's point, you know, you got to have to sit even under the deck right at that back, right at that southeast corner of their property to be affected by about 6 feet of the screen that we're talking about. So it's.
Right.
Noting we're not going
And
into
he's,
the house
but he's
here
still,
with that.
laces
Where
like that.
that 3 foot.
So hold back into the north a little bit too.
Conversation going on.
So, I got a suggestion here. What if you reduced the space down below, okay, and cantilevered that deck over it? If you came back 2 or 3 feet so that corner would be out of there, and then cantilevered over that to still have his deck up on top, but reduce the space back to give him a view, and then went ahead and did your clear panels, or even, you wouldn't even have to do the clear panels till you got halfway across the deck, because it's not gonna impede its view. So they still have some privacy with their deck, okay? And not have it all open, and then go ahead and do your plexiglass or your wire or whatever.
That would be a possibility, and it really doesn't change the cost too much as long as we don't cantilever more than about 2 feet. When you start cantilevering out past that,
Right.
then you start getting,
But
the
is
deck
that-
members themselves will start getting.
Right, but is that gonna be enough to satisfy Mr. Christian in his, concerns that he's gonna, if you move that back 2 feet, that changes that view quite a bit from his property, I would say. Without looking at it, but from what Mr. Ryan is saying, that would not,
Yeah, I'm not sure what.
Basically, instead of having a deck post out at that front corner,
Yeah.
pull the deck post back in about 2 feet. And what the deck still cantilever out, so you still have the 13 foot 6 on top that we have right now. And then your screen would go from that post back.
Yeah.
And still do the solid screen, so you just.
so your storage would be smaller,
Storage space, or usage space.
but you would still be able to have your deck the way you have it now.
And that corner of that north,
Yeah, it would be pulled back.
even though the deck's cantilevered.
It's cantilevered over that, so it's out beyond that.
But the railing that we have along the north side, is that gonna change?
No, it wouldn't change any of that. You still have your deck, it sits there underneath space if you move back that corner.
I don't know if John's concern is the railing on top of the deck, or it's the,
Well-
it's the wood slabs below the deck.
I
But
thought
when
we,
you're pulling that back 2 feet, then that shouldn't be too much of a concern. That's my opinion, without going over his property and actually looking at it, I can't say it.
I thought we got to the point where we said the upper deck was either gonna have clear plexiglass or going to have wire railing around it.
Right, but he's talking about if he brings the under part of the deck.
Well, no, I'm understanding the under part, but I think
Well,
So
Mr.
you
Ryan
want
was
to
talking
change
about.
the upper part and pull the other lower part back.
Yes,
A couple feet.
yes.
But Chuck, you wouldn't necessarily have to have that plexiglass going all the way back to hit the house. You could have that whole corner done, but they need a deck, you gotta have some privacy.
For what?
Well,
It's out in the open. Why do you have to have privacy?
Whatever. I don't know.
I think you would like some privacy.
Absolutely.
I don't like my neighbors, but I think everyone would love a little bit.
But they're not even gonna see it.
Well, I know,
We got 13 feet. Yeah.
Okay, we got a lot of conversation going on here. Go ahead, Mr. Chris.
You're starting to talk about privacy on the deck. I don't know that I've seen very many decks that are completely enclosed as far as from the floor of the deck to the top of the railing. I've seen plexiglass, I've seen wire, I've seen vertical posts. But I don't think that I've ever seen one completely enclosed for privacy.
Well, I mean, with all due respect, the neighbor to the south, Randy's place, is just filled in with dirt below the deck. So, I mean, he doesn't.
That
He's got a deck and it just comes out and it's filled.
was there before.
But it wouldn't really be any different than if it's enclosed, or if I just put dirt in there and
Well,
then.
the dirt was there.
We need to get going here because we need to make a decision on whether we're going to permit this or not. And what we're going to look at here is something that the board is comfortable with. And I'm kind of with Mr. DeWitt. I would like to see it be either plexiglass or for the deck itself above. Underneath, I don't mind this, but if it makes me happy to go 50% instead of this, that might improve something, that's fine too. But I think we need to move on to this because we could sit and discuss this for hours and we're not going to make any progress.
Your decision is okay.
I don't think anybody has any problem with the south side yard setback, 1.5 feet, that has not come up. And I really feel the deck itself is behind, or it's basically meets the line of sight setback. So the only discussion is the covering too much of a wall rather than that. And I, like I said, I would be much more comfortable if the deck itself didn't have that. And maybe lowered a little bit as far as some visibility through there. But that's, you got to make that decision. I can't make that decision for you. And I don't know how the rest of the board feels either, but that's kind of the way I feel.
And I think we can work with that. I think it would be more acceptable with Danny's suggestion, where if we keep the semi-solid screen that we've got for the protection, but pull it back 2 feet from the corner, that gives them a little bit of extra view and still gives us that little bit of privacy. The privacy issue is because of the closeness to the lot line. Even with this little bit of screening that we're asking for, the other deck looks down on top of us. It's the height difference just makes it a problem. So that little screen is going to help. They can't sit on their bottom of the deck and look up the skirt of the people on the upper deck. It's that type of protection. We're leaving it open on the front, and as Mr. Chris says, that's standard because we want as much view of the lake straight out as possible. So we're trying to keep that open and visible. And so if that's acceptable to the board, we like that better than going with 50% overall. And I think that actually, as Dan said, kind of opens up a little bit more of the view. Does that seem reasonable?
Seems reasonable. Mr. McManaway?
Yeah, I like the idea, well, I mean, everything else I was about, that's what I get
Mr. Hugler? Have any questions about it or comments?
I do not. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep up with the notes. So I'm doing a lot of listening, and yeah, I don't have any at this time.
Okay. Did you have any other comments? Any other comments from the audience? Okay, let's move to finding of facts with the changes we talked about.
That's what you actually want.
And that's just,
So how are we gonna,
I'm sorry.
how are we gonna write this down?
I just want to be very comfortable with that as far as
Yes.
statements. Okay. We're going to agree, I'm not sure they agree.
Yeah, and I guess we need to put that in some words we can,
Please and thank you.
yeah. Let's get some clarification.
You say it's 2 foot cantilever.
We're approving the deck itself,
Yes.
and we're approving and and the request was 3 feet, 6 inches from the required 10 feet on the south side, and 27 feet from the shoreline, and that we're approving.
Yes.
And that's all we're approving here, with the changes that you're talking about doing as far as the plan.
With the post at the northeast corner, the support post set back 2 feet, and the screening above and below the deck set back 2 feet in line with that cantilever post.
Would that be parallel to the house then, or parallel to the lake side of the deck?
I want to just move that post back, and Chuck will understand this because we're getting so narrow on the other side. I don't want to cantilever the whole thing because then that other post becomes a problem. So we will probably come out to the far corner of the deck on the south side. We'll probably put another post along in the middle, and then we'll start cantilevering that last triangle piece out to get us back to that 2 feet. Because that minimizes our cantilever and gives us much space to work underneath the deck. It also lets us make the railing as strong as possible that way. So that far northeast post moves in 2 feet, and the screening moves in the same 2 feet with it.
And again, I don't know how to exactly put this in the petition, because what we're voting for are approving those two things. It's the site plan.
But the 27 feet would still stay the same.
This 27 feet stays the same. Oh, basically you're adding, basically saying about that location. So you're approving what we are asking for as far as the locations, but then you're adding an addendum that the proposed
changes
back
made to the site plan.
Screening back.
So it's with the.
I'm going to your mouth, but
Vision was moving the lower part back 2 feet.
Okay, so can I ask a question?
Yes,
All right, so the upper part of the deck, which would be considered the railing, is that going to be enclosed in any way, shape, or form?
Other than that.
it will be enclosed out to that same 2 foot back point
On the north side,
on the north side.
it's not going to be clear.
The last 2 feet will be clear.
When you say the last 2 feet, you mean?
The farthest east 2 feet of the railing will be clear.
Enclosed 11.5 feet. 2
Is
feet.
that, Dan, was that what you were suggesting? I thought you had suggested that the entire upper side be clear, and then by moving the post back 2 feet and then cantilevering it, that the north side then will be covered still.
No, I suggested that they have some, that from that cantilever back, that some of that can be clear, but from the house to not impede your view, they should be able to have some type of privacy. That's what I
Okay, so
not the whole thing.
the privacy that you were referring to was on both under the deck and above the deck.
Correct.
Yes.
Well, at one point, since Mr. Ryan's house is, the walk-up basement is lower than yours, by the time you get to the top of the railing on the main deck, the top of the railing is pretty close to just the top of your deck itself on your, because it's,
Yeah, I think you're about right.
so, I mean, it really, when you're on the upper deck, that railing is not going to affect the view, especially if it's pulled back 2 feet, if it's, the privacy screen on the upper portion of his deck, because it's pretty much even with the top of your deck surface itself.
Well, if you're going to talk about enclosing the entire north side, and you're gonna have them cantilever this thing, move it back 2 feet, I see that as a change order on them that adversely affects them. Now, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I mean, you're only talking about changing 2 foot, the eastern 2 foot underneath the deck for the view. Correct?
For this use, forward there.
Hey, Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need a motion to go to finding of facts in a second, I think.
Yeah, we haven't
Okay.
done that yet.
Okay.
Okay, well, I guess I would say, if that's what you're going to vote on, and if you approve that, then having him move cantilever is going to give him some additional costs that I don't think are reasonable and doesn't resolve the issue that we have, as I see it.
I didn't understand.
Okay, as a builder, cantilevering 2 foot is no extra cost. Your floor joists, everything are
Same way.
gonna be the same length, gonna be the same depth, and they can cantilever over 2 feet without any additional cost, correct?
Instead of having one continuous view, you got.
Right.
two
You're going to have
Right.
less storage area underneath, I guess.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
And it does affect how the sliding doors work underneath. Little sliding doors stop.
So,
No, we're changing to add a cantilever on the east side. We are not pulling it in from the north side. So the cantilever is only on the east side. So the north line stays the same. So your post will still be in the same location going north. It's just pulled back. So it shouldn't affect your doors or anything on the house.
what about your screen on the east side?
The screen follows that post is what we're talking about. It only goes as far as that post.
But by cantilevering it, you're reducing the amount of storage underneath there.
Yes, we are. That's our concession. If you don't think that is worth it, we would prefer to have the 2 feet, but that's.
Well, I would prefer that you have it 2 feet.
Okay, so I guess we're back to our original.
And
So,
I think what we're trying to deal with is your line of sight from your patio.
I understand. What I'm saying is if I cantilever it, it's going to cause them to have less storage, but they're still going to screen it in as they propose, then I will withdraw my objection or my concerns.
So you wanted to do it.
So the proposal goes through as he is not asking for the concession, so we'll leave it the way we present it.
I mean, I still have the concerns about the solid wall. And that those concerns are not going away by cantilevering it. They're still there.
Well, if you're objecting to the solid wall because of causing a problem from your line of view from patio, and we think this will take care of it, then
Well, I don't
Then
know
you're
if-
saying you don't have an
I don't know if
objection to that.
It would take care of it. It might take care of a little bit of it.
You're saying it's only 2 feet. You'd rather see a whole lot more than you did.
I mean, you're essentially talking about, instead of removing, having a solid wall that was no longer, that wasn't there before, for all practical purposes, this is a solid wall. Instead of being 13 feet out and
so you,
14 feet high, it's going to be 11 feet high.
but what we're dealing with here is the line of view. And this is not you're objecting to the wall itself. Aesthetically, you don't like the looks of that wall. That's what.
Well, I would fall back then to when you changed the ordinances about fences, that a fence could no longer be any more than 50%. How is why was that? Was that done? Because that's essentially the same thing. If you had a solid panel fence, a dog-eared fence that was 6 foot tall, that you could not see through, that you no longer allow because you can't, for whatever reason, I don't know what the reason was that was changed, but it's changed to 50%. How is this wall, which would be
There's some places where it's solid.
less than 5 feet away from the property line, any different
You can't put a fence down there.
There are places where a solid fence is allowed.
You have one next to your house on Lake Shore.
It can't be in the front yard.
Right, not in,
Thank you.
And I think part of this is if we were to pull the whole deck back 2 feet, you wouldn't have a question about having the screen anyway, because we were back within where we were supposed to be. It becomes a question because we were asking for that additional little 2 feet to get us to 13 foot 5 or whatever out there on that front edge. It's really the 2 feet that we're talking about that is an ordinance violation. So we are willing to cut that back. If that doesn't satisfy him, we would prefer to have it. And it shouldn't be wanting to do that much more. It's the 50% piece of the ordinance he's discussing is a front yard issue in any district, but we are not in the front yard with this because we are still not into the 25-foot setback that's the front yard piece. We're only violating the line of sight piece a little bit, and it doesn't really apply in this case. And again, we can satisfy that by just making that last 2 feet 50% open if that were the case, because once we get back a couple feet, we're within what we can normally do. We could put a solid fence on the property line by the ordinances, as long as we're not into the front yard.
right.
And the definition of front yard is 25 feet?
From the lake, on the L1 properties, it's 25 feet from the lake, correct?
Okay. Let's move to finding the facts.
So, where we have.
I think all we're going to vote on is what's exactly put in front of us and what they work out from there. We've given suggestions, but we're voting on this. Remember, if you vote no on any of the 3 questions, you must vote no on the variance. And we do have to have 3 out of 4 to vote yes to approve the variance. Is everybody ready for the questions?
Yes.
Question number 1, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Mr. McManaway?
Yes.
Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. Hubler?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Number 2, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Mr. McManaway? Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. Hubler?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Number 3, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. Mr. McManaway?
Yes.
Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. Hubler?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Entertain a motion that we approve this variance.
I make a motion.
Second.
Motion has been made by Mr. McManaway and seconded by Mr. Osborne to approve this variance. Is there any further discussion? No further discussion. How do you vote on the variance, Mr. McManaway?
Yes.
Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. Hubler?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. Next petition on the agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Next petition on the agenda is 2020-008B. And this is for James Smith. And did all of you have chance to go down and check out the property there?
Yes,
Did you have a chance to go check it out, Mr. Hughlin?
yes, I did.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
James, if you'd like to give us a little presentation, I know we talked a little bit about this.
Okay, we are looking to put a 12 by 16 storage shed in our backyard for Denise's materials that she uses for the farmer's market. We were told that there is a 25-foot variance, or 25-foot offset required from the north-south alley, and a 10-foot offset from the east-west alley. The 12 by 16 building with the 16 feet going east and west, we are requesting a 14-foot distance from the alley, because that will put the front of the building in line in the same plane as the front of the existing garage. We intend to put the building abutting the deck that already exists on the garage. And on that particular piece, there is a approximately 16 to 20 inch drop off in front of that garage building. So by doing the 14-foot variance, we would have a whole lot less fill and dirt work to do to put the portable building on. And it is also closer to our electrical service in the garage in order to run electricity to the building.
It won't be connected to the garage?
It will not be connected to the garage. It will be butted up adjacent to the deck. That will also allow us to use that deck as an entryway into the storage building.
Now, the garage itself sits how far off the alley?
The garage is at 10 foot.
10 foot.
It has a variance and it's 10 foot from the alley. So the building being 14 foot allows clearance for the electrical lines that come from the post on the corner of the two alleys. And we do not have to deal with any of that. And yet it doesn't put it so far forward into our back door that it creates a problem for us.
No, it only has to be 10 feet off of the east-west alley that you told me.
That is what we were told, yes. And it will be the 12 foot from the existing deck leaves us approximately 15 and a half foot from the alley.
What's the differences in the two alleys, do you know? Width?
Yeah.
Why one is 25 and one's, yeah.
I
We
can't tell you.
were also told that there was a little bit of concern about the sight line coming up to the corner, that the new regulations say 50 feet in each direction from the corner. And
It's interesting, if it was a street, it was one
Usually
thing.
25 feet setback.
okay, and the positioning of this building would allow approximately 30 foot from each direction and have a clear sight line.
Yeah, I don't know where the sight line comes in.
Yeah, it wouldn't, yeah.
Mr. Smith, I drove by there today, and is that alley really used that much? It didn't, I didn't want to drive my truck down, let's put it that way.
The east-west alley.
Yeah, I was going north-south.
The east east-west alley is used quite a bit because the house catty corner from mine, they do use that to access their driveway and their parking space behind it. But the
The
north-south
north-south.
alley is almost never used.
Right.
They're-
That's
The only time that it's used usually is when the utility truck comes down like they did the other day, to trim the tree that fell across the line.
Okay.
And actually, I think we have the only place on that entire north-south alley that has more than 3 feet, of clearance from the alley itself.
Okay.
We walked the length of it, and everyone else butted up to it,
Right.
every back building.
Right.
So we thought, man, surely we
Right.
Chuck, what is your actual process on the alleys as far as look? I mean, I know there's been issues with the property line being in the center of the alley.
The one to the back is an easement
What's the easement on alley?
and not an alley.
And
Although people have driven in it past, but it's an easement for the utilities. My concern with,
And
there,
all of my distances were measured from actually the side of the alley. They were not measured from the center.
right, and that's where your property line is. The property line is from that. But my concern was that it was going in the rear yard less than the 25 feet. Now, after our last meeting,
but it's still written that way.
Russ Mason came to me and said, well, I never ever enforce that because that's the rear yard and it doesn't make any difference. I always let that.
Never written that way.
I understand,
Yeah.
because we're gonna talk about it at the plan commission meeting
Right.
next week, but right now, this is what it says, and that's why I asked them to get a variance. Do I think that it's going to be a problem if you look down the alley to the south when they're talking about, 2 or 3 feet, 4 feet, it pretty much, that's just the way it is, for everybody. But because we have to meet what it says in the book. But I would be willing to say that where they're going to put it is there's no harm, no foul,
Right.
not a
And
problem.
that's my next question. We're only talking about as far as your variance required right now is from the easement, not the alley.
Right,
Not correct?
correct.
So we wouldn't have had to do this?
What's that?
We wouldn't have had to do.
No, you had to do it because,
You have to do it,
If you waited 6 months, you may not have it. We don't know the answer to that either.
You might be trend setting.
yes, you're trendsetters.
Money.
A lot of times you can come in and something else is still in process. So, sometimes you beat the line and you get ahead, sometimes you don't wait long enough and you yeah. Kind of like Vegas, I guess.
How big did you say the building was going to be?
12 by 16, and that's under the eaves.
12 by 16?
Right, and we were under the understanding that 120 square feet would not have required a variance, but the larger building does.
Right. But the 120 square feet still has to meet the setbacks.
Right.
It just doesn't require a permit. Because we had one of those down on the roof floor.
Mr. Eubler, did you have any questions?
They've been answered. Thank you.
Mr. Osborne?
No.
Mr. Manaway?
What's the height of this building?
The height of the building, will be just under 11 feet 8 inches because it is a portable building that they have to keep the height on the truck under 13 feet 8 inches in order to move it into the location.
Thank you.
Any comments from the audience? Or questions? Okay. We'll move to finding of facts. Everybody ready? Question number 1, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. McManaway,
Yes.
Mr. Hubler,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Number 2, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. McManaway,
Yes.
Mr. Hubler,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Number 3, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. McManaway,
Yes.
Mr. Hubler,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. I would entertain a motion that we approve this variance.
Oh, make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Osborne and seconded by Mr. McManaway that we approve this variance. Any further discussion? How do you vote on the variance, Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. McManaway?
Yes.
Mr. Hubler?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You're all set.
Thank you very much.
That was a little bit.
That was much quicker.
Why don't I work?
You just applied too slow is what happened.
I have to thank you for all your help. He got several phone calls. So I do appreciate you taking those phone calls and helping us.
You're welcome.
And your whole office has been very nice to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Now we can rock and roll.
Yes, absolutely.
Come to the farmer's market. You can see
All
what
right,
I
we'll do
do.
that.
I make meat for me.
All right, great.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Kevin, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah, we're not recording anymore.
Do you remember her, Dan?
Yeah. We had a motion to adjourn and,
Who's that?
Yeah, what's the adjourn?
Oh, no, we got other things.
oh, we got
Oh,
another.
business, okay.
Just that she taught PE at the high school for years. She used to be Denise Jenkins. Okay, she,
Oh, that's Brenda.
yeah, she probably well. Yeah, but she, lived in Purdue or West Lafayette. She works with Purdue athletes,
Really?
trying to keep them, their studies going and all that. She-
No, okay.
Anyway, yeah, they've got a house there. Nice people. Old business,
Done.
new business coming up.
We will have a meeting next month.
Okay.
So what's that mean, Chuck?
And we got new business coming. That's all it means.
Yeah, we've got 2 variances. And that's-
We built a house out there on Tamarack on the corner.
Hugh Richards put the foundation
You
in.
get the foundation, that's on.
I'm not sure who that one is.
And then another thing, Chuck, I noticed, I don't know, I know you take care of permits and all that stuff, but I just noticed some fencing going up on South Main Street, out there like 908. Right there by, almost like our court, and then going on out there, another, like, solid,
Okay.
thing.
On South Main Street. Is it past Davis Street?
Yeah,
At Motor Center.
I know they had a lot of material there, building something, and they put a lot of stuff on the court. And I was gonna go back, I know they had a bunch of material there that they could do something, but it might have been actually inside on that one.
On the east side.
East side.
Have they got the fence,
But
got
the
any
fence,
progress on that next to you?
trying to figure out what the property was on the fence, but I don't.
They haven't done anything with it yet, it's I'm fine, Chuck's got the letter in that it's gonna be part of closing, then
Right.
care as long as it gets enforced at that point.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that works for you, Chuck, is it, I don't think they can close on the house without a CFO, and Chuck has to get in the CFO, they're gonna have to fix those things before they can close. So,
You come out on the fence.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
How far is
Chuck's
it?
got the thing too, so.
The fence is the one right there from city tax.
Yeah.
And that fence, doesn't it stop right there pretty much where the end of the house comes?
It's a little bit in front of that, but actually the sidewalk is the property line. So, as Mr. Chris was saying, you know, in the front yard, it's supposed to be 50% visible.
I mean, I don't want to speak out of line here as far as, I know what the ordinance calls for, but I know as far as practice, because it's for line of sight, but we've only required that to be from the, if it's from the house forward, because if the house is not 25 feet, then you can't make them go back for a sight thing on the fence when it doesn't.
But I don't think the fence has any, the fence is not addressed in the line of sight ordinance, it's only addressed in the setback ordinance. So 50% is 25 feet back.
No,
Right, I'm just saying 95 feet is what all that
Yeah.
did, even though.
it's gotta go back 25 feet.
And the same thing on mine.
Keller Construction is gonna build that. And they got Davis Plumbing, Richards Concrete, is who they've listed. And the owners are Woodward, Parker Woodward.
Huh.
Their address right now is in Winnemac.
I was wondering, I didn't even know that place was open for sale for somebody to
Yeah.
get on in there until, so I'm going in, across the river,
Where is it?
that's about the river.
Oh, okay. Okay, Tamarack, it's,
Yeah,
that makes sense. Jug there by,
Yeah, as soon as you turn on, camera, right on
okay.
the rest of the corner.
Oh, I did see, yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about.
I was just curious on that.
Any other things come up? Okay, this meeting's adjourned.
Let me ask you a comment, because I didn't know in a minute anyway, but as far as when we were talking about the deck going out with the variance, if you did put screen or anything down on the bottom, whatever and stuff, and say now you decided you want to screen it, would you have to go to get a permit to screen it?
That was my question.
yes, technically, because you're changing it.
You're gonna change the structure of it.
No, but you're changing what it was, you're enclosing it now.
Yeah, but I mean, that doesn't necessarily, when you get a permit, whether it's enclosed or not.
No, would I notice it?
I'm just asking a
No.
question, I'm not arguing. the point.
No, would it be noticed? Chances are, I wouldn't notice it because it's on lakeside
Yeah.
as opposed to street side, but the neighbors would.
This is just a hypothetical thing.
Trust me, we would get the calls from the neighbors.
What
Well,
was
and
required.
what it gets down to though, is we kind of talked about this, is that if they decided to put furniture on there that did the same screening, you know, they could put 2 planter boxes along that wall that screened it, and you guys can't say anything.
They could drape their towels over it.
Yeah.
Whatever.
You get the Chinese screens.
But this is the right way to do it and have
I mean,
it tie into the house and not be trashy, and that's why they want to do it right.
I'm not trying to be
Why did they
disrespectful in
limit
any
it?
way, you know, I just know.
All I can figure is he started feeling bad about it because.
Well, it's gonna cost more money. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
But if you look at it, his view is only obstructed if you were standing with your back against the house right at that back corner.
right.
And
Sorry to bring it up, when I'm talking about the line of sight,
A line of boats.
I just want to see it get along.
the line of sight is a term that
Honestly,
means
the
straight
right
line.
time talking to them, discussing this, I made sure that there was contact made before they ever got the letter about the zoning appeal, so that
That this was gonna happen.
this was gonna happen, and we talked about it, and they talked about a bunch of different things.
You say all this
I don't think they stayed okay.
yeah, as soon as.
I mean, to be honest with you, it changed from line of sight.
All right, thanks y'all. See you later.
All right, we'll see you.
Thanks, Chief.
Sounds good, David. Yeah, when you change it from line of sight to line of view, you make it ambiguous then.
And like
Line
I
of sight is straight
Chuck and I
line
were
from the
talking,
corner
you
to the
know, the
corner.
2 foot, that doesn't hurt us on boards or anything. Now, if you would have pushed it back more than 2 foot for the cantilever, then you start getting a bigger member, and now we're
Right.
blocking it with a different.
With, yeah, you're blocking it underneath.
Obviously,
But part of the whole thing for me is the elevation difference.
Elevation.
Because they are higher, they're
Right,
looking over the
exactly.
deck.
I went by there late,